Hello everyone, welcome back to Literary Criticism. In the last class, we have studied about Horace and his important works and his background. Today, we will move on to Horace's observations on poetry. Horace's observations on poetry are divided into 6 heads. 1. Its nature. 2. Its function. 3. Its subject matter. 4. Its kinds. 5. Its language. 6. Nature and art. Now let us examine each of them separately. Today we will examine its nature and its function. Its nature. Horace did not directly call the process of composition of poetry as imitation, as said by Plato and Aristotle, but indirectly called the poet an imitator. We have already studied about Aristotle and Plato and their observations on poetry. Horace did not directly refer poetry as imitation, but he indirectly called poet as an imitator. This is a quotation from Horace. I would advise the well instructed imitator. This is how Horace referred poet. I would advise the well instructed imitator to take his model from life and customs. He, that is the poet, uses fiction and mingled facts with fancy. Fancy means imagination. Fiction composed to please should be very near the truth. What is its meaning? He asks the poet, who is the imitator, to take his examples, models from human life and human customs. Then he says that the poet uses fact and fiction, fact and imagination blends together in order to compose poetry. And the purpose is to please the audience. And truth should also be the object of poetry. Here, he agrees with Aristotle by stating that a poet should imitate the actions of living human beings or their life and customs. Further, he says that poetry is based on fiction or a mixture of facts and fancy, facts and imagination. He also adds that poetry should express the truth. Here, we find the similarity between the views of Aristotle and Horace regarding the nature of poetry. Though it is a fictional composition, it should include the truth of life, and beauty. It should please the reader or audience. He goes further by calling poetry a creative endeavor, creative activity. So, this is how he defines the nature of poetry. It is an imitation. He calls poet an imitator. Poet should imitate from life and customs. He blends fact and fancy in order to create poetry, and poetry should also express truth. So these ideas Horace's ideas are similar to that of Aristotle, and he also calls poetry a creative endeavor. Now, the function of poetry. In defining, function means objective. In defining the function of poetry, Horace blended the views of both Aristotle and Plato. He emphasized two major elements regarding function of poetry. What are the two major elements? One, a poet has two basic desires in composition of poetry. That is, to improve or reform, and to please or entertain. See, Horace observes that poet has two wishes, two desires. One desire is to improve the society or reform the society. The other one is to please or entertain. Secondly, a poet can achieve immortality or fulfill his purpose of writing if he synthesizes these both elements of improving and pleasing. So, very important functions, he says. The poet will be having two desires. One is to improve the society, the other is to please. The poet will be able to achieve immortality if he blends together or if he synthesizes both these elements into his writing, that is, improving and pleasing. The meaning of the above dictum is simple. The function of poetry is to please or entertain and improve or teach. Teach what? Morality. The first is primary and later secondary. The first one meaning the pleasing or entertainment, that is primary, and teaching is secondary. He considers poet as a moral improver of society and did not reject emotional appeal of poetry, but reinstate means say with more intensity or state it again to give more importance. Reinstate that it should be used for the upgradation of morality of the society. So see, you can see that Horace is actually a mixture of Plato and Aristotle. Plato was the person who insisted that poetry should teach morality, and Aristotle was for pleasure, and Horace brings together both. He considers poet as an improver of the society. At the same time, he gives equal importance to pleasure as well. According to him, why poets are respected in the society? Because they show the path of morality and teach what is good for the society. He says that poets are respected by the society because they show the path of morality and teach what is good for the society. So today we have learned nature of poetry and function of poetry according to Horace. In the next class, we will continue the discussion on the observations of poetry. Thank you.